David Michelinie. I'm a comic book writer. I've written comics for about 30 years. I started writing for Marvel Comics in 1978, worked exclusively for them for about 15 years, during which I spent 8 years writing various Spider-Man books, 5 of those years writing The Amazing Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man title. During that tenure, I created a character called Venom, whose first full appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man number 300. I'd be happy to tell you a little bit about my creation, Venom. The origin of the black suit in Spider-Man came from a maxi series written by Jim Shooter called The Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars, in which Spider-Man and a bunch of other heroes went into space, went to another planet to fight a major alien menace. On that planet, Spider-Man came across a blob of black material which flowed onto him and became the black and white suit, and he carried this back to Earth with him after the Secret Wars were over, and it became for a while his standard costume. The origin of the black suit differed in the comic books from the cartoon show because the comic book origin tied in with continuity of published comics, and doing the same origin in the cartoon would be confusing because the people watching the cartoon would not have had the opportunity to read the stories in the comic books. The Venom suits, the symbiote that becomes the Venom suit's weaknesses are mainly fire. It is repelled by fire, it can be harmed by fire, and certain sonic waves, sonic frequencies can cause it a great deal of pain. Those are the two weapons that can be used against the suit. Eddie Brock doesn't want to free himself of Venom, because Venom gives him the power to get revenge on Spider-Man, for whom he blames the destruction of his own life. The only way that Eddie Brock would cease to be Venom is if Spider-Man were to die. Once that happened, the entire motivation for being Venom would go away, and Eddie Brock would become Eddie Brock. Then the alien symbiote would just be the alien symbiote. There would be no Venom any longer. The alien symbiote would probably like nothing better than to be with Peter Parker again. Peter Parker was its first host, was the mother, if you will, who brought it from the alien planet, and Peter Parker rejected it. It would probably go back to Peter Parker in a heartbeat, but since Parker still doesn't want it, it harbors the resentment and turns that into a hatred and rage against Peter Parker, which it uses as Venom to try to destroy him. Originally, when Spider-Man decided he didn't want the suit to meld with his physiology, to become part of him, he went to a church tower and used the bell in the church tower, the loud sounds from the bell, the ringing bell, to drive the suit away from him. The suit has very subtle powers. It's mostly the powers mostly powers of enhancement. The suit increases the strength of whoever wears it. It also has the ability to create camouflage by mimicking the background of the whatever is around the wearer. It can also become transparent. It can also become similar or identical to the clothing of the wearer. So the wearer walking down the street can wear a police uniform and then a business suit and then a sweatsuit, and therefore be unrecognizable. Spider-Man was my favorite comic book superhero ever, so when I was given the assignment to write The Amazing Spider-Man, it was literally a dream job. It was terrific. It was like when you were a little kid and you watch something on TV and you go out in the backyard and you're pretending that you're that character. This was the same for an adult, but I got to create new stories with those characters, and I got paid for it. I loved writing Spider-Man. It was probably my most satisfying assignment in my 30-year career. Eddie Brock is an ex-reporter. He was a top reporter in New York, whose career went into a tailspin because of a story that Spider-Man broke that proved that a story he had published was untrue. He ended up writing for tabloids, spewing venomous stories about celebrities and so forth, and became pretty much just a shadow of what he was originally. Venom's most difficult challenge was probably when he had to ally himself with his most hated enemy, Spider-Man. When Carnage was formed, Carnage was an unrepentant murderer whose goal was to create chaos and bloodshed. Venom, though a psychopath himself, had a twisted sense of morality, of protecting innocent people, because he felt he himself was an innocent who was destroyed by Spider-Man. So when something that he in essence had created, his spawn, being Carnage, went on a rampage of murder, he could not stop Carnage. Spider-Man could not stop Carnage. The only way to stop Carnage was for Spider-Man and Venom to work together, which went against everything that Venom had, every goal that Venom had set out for himself. And that was probably the most difficult task he's had to face. Can Spider-Man ever beat Venom for good? Probably the only way to beat Venom would be to kill either Eddie Brock or the symbiote, and that would have an extremely negative effect against Peter Parker, having to live with the idea that he had killed someone. So he would probably try not to end Venom necessarily, but to separate Eddie Brock and the symbiote so that the Venom entity would no longer exist. Todd McFarlane came aboard with Amazing Spider-Man issue number 298. I had done a couple of issues before that with John Romita Jr., but Todd took over with 298 and stayed on for several years. Working with Todd was fabulous. He was a thorough professional, drew great pictures. It made it easier for me to plot, because I knew whatever I plotted, I was going to get great pictures back that stuck to the plot, that told the story clearly. And the pictures themselves were exciting. It made writing dialogue to them fun, and that made the whole experience really delightful. In the comic books, Eddie Brock became Venom when his life had reached a low point and he was considering suicide, and he went to a church for spiritual guidance. The alien symbiote was lurking in that church, because this was where Peter Parker had driven it away with the sound of the church bells. It sensed Eddie Brock's hatred for Spider-Man. It also had a great resentment of Spider-Man for having been rejected, and it joined with Eddie Brock, and together they became the entity that was now known as Venom. Venom knows everything about Spider-Man, including his secret identity, because of the alien symbiote that becomes the Venom costume. When the symbiote had joined with Peter Parker, it lived with Peter Parker. It knew everything about him, everything that happened while it was a part of Peter Parker's life, while it was the Spider-Man costume. When it joined with Eddie Brock, it brought that knowledge with it and passed it along to Eddie Brock. So now Eddie Brock knows everything that happened to Peter Parker while the alien symbiote was with Peter Parker as Spider-Man. Venom's offspring is known as Carnage. Eddie Brock was in jail with a psychopathic serial killer named Cletus Cassidy. When the alien symbiote broke him out, part of the alien's substance was left behind. This turned out to be in essence, a seed, which joined with Cletus Cassidy to become another symbiote-powered villain. And they took on the name of Carnage.